Today, the Climate and Environmental Justice Committee, also known as CEJ, is co-sponsoring our Sunday forum. So David Holman, before David Holman introduces the speaker, a couple details. There'll be some time at the end of this presentation for your questions. If you are attending online, you can type your questions into the Q&A feature at the bottom of the computer screen during our presentation, and then we will read those questions to the speaker at the end. If you are attending in person, please make a mental note of your questions and we will give you a chance to ask them at the end. So now, David Holman.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Myra. It's my pleasure to introduce Deanna Chaman Salas. I heard her speak at the Climate and Environment or Citizens Climate Lobby meeting earlier this year, and I found her talk really interesting and very thought-provoking. So I hope you enjoy it today. Deanna is the director of Hennepin County's Climate and Resiliency Department. I actually didn't know we had one of those, but we do. And they have a mission of supporting the climate mitigation and adaptation efforts in the community. Prior to that, she served as a consultant for the Global Food Banking Network and worked as principal analyst for Second Harvest Heartland, where she designed a strategy to reduce child hunger in the Minnesota's metropolitan area. Deanna has a master's in public administration from Syracuse University, and she has a BA in political science. She co-developed the Peruvian National Strategy for family farming and food security. She's been a speaker. She's got a lot of speaking engagements here, but she's been a speaker at the UN Climate Change Conferences, COP20, COP26, the No More Food to Waste Conference in The Hague, and the UN's Women of the Mountain Conference, as well as the World Bank 2015 annual meeting. So please join me in welcoming Deanna.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I feel so grateful to be here with all of you on a Sunday morning in this beautiful church. So I'm here to share a bit of our work with climate that we've been leading within Hennepin County. As it was mentioned before, my name is Deanna Chaman Salas. I'm the Director of Climate and Resiliency. I oversee the implementation of our climate action plan within Hennepin County, which is really bold, and we're trying to make it really meaningful, having in consideration the needs of our communities and obviously your expertise as well. And thank you so much. So today I just wanted to give you a bit of a background of what we'll be talking about. First is a review of our climate action plans. What are we doing? What is the purpose of our climate action plan? Some updates on the foundational strategies that we have been leading so far, and it's been just 1 year. And then what we've been working on to strengthen our partnerships and some opportunities. If I know many of you are really excited about working with community, the fact that you're here today shows that engagement. So we'll be talking about that. But first, I wanted to talk about what is the purpose of our climate action plan and our climate and resiliency department. So we were created last year in May, upon the adoption of our climate action plan. And the core of our mission is to foster a climate change mitigation and adaptation, focusing on building resiliency, and especially looking at how do we strengthen access to different services to communities that are facing disparities historically within our county. And probably, thank you so much. I think it's not showing there, but it should show what are the main goals of our climate action plan. So we have one big goal, which is achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Really, really bold. And so we have specific targets for different years. But if we were to summarize our climate action plan, I would say the main goal that we have is cutting greenhouse gas emissions. And then the other one is supporting adaptation. But these two goals have a shared lens, which is disparity reduction lens. So it's looking at equity and looking at the areas that are facing more disparities. How do we support them to be more resilient for climate change as it is happening. And you've seen probably what is happening right now. It's early November. We're seeing a pretty warm weather. It might feel nice, but it may not be really good in the long term for our climate and for food security, but also for flooding that might be happening in certain areas of our county. We see that might affect different families. Pollution is also affecting the wellness of our residents, especially in areas such as the north area of Minneapolis. So we're looking at all of these different elements and how we should be responding to these different issues, but also considering the opportunity for creating green infrastructure, green jobs, looking at this issue and maybe potentially responding with greater opportunities for our residents, and then expanding natural areas as well as agricultural lands. And when we talked about prioritizing our residents that are facing the highest disparities and needs, we did an analysis. As you can tell here, this is a GIS map that is showing areas with highest disparities. We essentially took the CDC Social Vulnerability Index, which has a lot of these different indicators, and added a couple of health-related indicators to understand where are our communities that are facing those greatest disparities. And as you can tell here, the reddest, the color are the areas where we have climate vulnerable populations. And we created this map to help us understand, okay, within our first 10 years of work, where should we be putting more efforts to respond to these issues? It doesn't mean that we won't be working across all of the county. We will be doing that, but this is where we want to focus for now, our responses. And there's an importance to why we're using this equity lens. There's a strong correlation, as we mentioned before, between the capacity to overcome challenges when you have the ability to, if there's flooding in your house, you pick up your bags and maybe move somewhere else. A lot of people cannot do that. A lot of people cannot simply leave their houses, or if there are differences in the weather, just increase their energy consumption. It's these different small changes that are happening in our environment can make or break the living conditions of many of our residents. So we want to be really thoughtful of how do we respond, but also not just simply responding to, but ensuring that we have a strong community engagement work where we are interacting with our communities, learning from their lived experiences, supporting them and empowering them. And so our climate action plan is really big. It's almost 100 pages. If you're ever bored, I would recommend reading it. But it's pretty broad and it has so many goals, and it's difficult to break it down into something concrete and actionable. So on our first year, we thought, okay, how do we make this into something concrete that we can share across our departments, share with our communities? And so we thought that the best way to implement this work was with 7 foundational strategies that were identified by our staff as the best place to tackle this issue. And so these vary from strengthening individual and community resilience all the way to decreasing the heat island effect within areas of highest vulnerability. So we're looking at both reducing emissions, but also creating opportunities for green infrastructure, for green jobs. So it's pretty broad. And so today I wanted to give you some input on what has been happening with the implementation of some of these foundational strategies, so that you know that we're not just admiring the issue. So we have, for the first foundational strategy, which is strengthening community resilience, we are looking at developing urban agriculture programs. In fact, we have 2 right now, one that is supported with the University of Minnesota Extension in North Minneapolis. For this, we're using, the county has tax-forfeited lots that are currently not used. And so we thought, okay, why don't we just leverage those opportunities and work with community-based organizations that are around these lots so that they could work with their youth and their families to give added value to the lots, and that is through urban agriculture. So we're doing that. It's working well. We're really excited. Now we're moving on to a phase where we would like to use all of the tax-forfeited lots for food security. And then we're also mapping mitigation and adaptation community-driven efforts. I think one thing that I really want to do within my work is to make sure that our communities are leading the way. Communities have been really strong for a long time, and this is something that I've seen both in the South, here in the North. We have so much to learn from our communities. So I would like us to, work very closely with our communities and just give them the support that they need to lead the way. Part of that analysis is also taking hard data, such as GIS. We have a series of Mesonet stations that are managed by our emergency management department. These stations essentially help us assess variability in the weather, and also are helpful to understand, maybe in this area there might be some flooding due to an excessive rainfall. Maybe in this area might be some droughts. So we're using those stations to help us understand what is happening across the county. There are gaps, so we're trying to expand the number of Mesonet stations. And then we also have our second foundational strategy is cutting greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. So for that, we have a couple of pieces of work that are happening. One of them is we have a green fleet strategy for 2030, which is essentially helping us reduce our Hennepin County fleet from single occupancy vehicles that are, using gas into 50% hybrid and 20% EVs. And so right now, I just wanted to share that we are reaching a 22% hybrid and EVs so far, which I think is really good for the county. We still have a long way to go. But along with that, we have been expanding our charging stations within our facilities. So we have 24 right now. And last year, we won Department of Energy award, some award that's called Communities Leap, and it's essentially to help us coordinate with communities of interest to understand how do they want to use, carbon-free transportation. You've probably have heard that there's a lot of money coming from the federal level for electric vehicles. That's exciting, that's awesome. But we want to make sure that not only those that are driving Teslas can have access to everything. We want to make sure that those other communities that are often forgotten can have a say in how the funding might be used, can tell us what make more sense. Maybe we can launch an, EV car share program. Maybe that's not the way. Maybe we want something different like bikes or investing more in transit. Whatever comes out of those conversations will tell us a better story on how to use our funds. This is what I was mentioning before with what we've achieved in cutting greenhouse gas emissions. In 2021, through replacing 20 vehicles with hybrid, we reduced 60 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. This year, we've ordered 31 vehicles that are essentially 17 EVs and 14 hybrids, and that will help us achieve 140 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. And again, our goal overall is to reach 250 EVs and 160 hybrids. And again, at some point, we should not have hybrids, but 2050. So it's a long way to go. And then we also have preventing food waste and diverting organics from the trash. And probably some of you are familiar with methane and how also food can be a source of greenhouse gas emissions. But at the same time, food can be obviously a source of nutrition. And if we do a good job at diverting food when it doesn't have to be waste, we can both, tackle food security, ensure that families that need access to food have it at a timely moment, and also, we are reducing emissions. So what we're doing right now is we are creating a waste prevention series of grants. We are expanding residential organic programs. This is through recycling with our environment and energy team. And then we are actually in the process of trying to gather funding for an anaerobic digester facility, which would be in Brooklyn Park. And actually Kareem is a key part of that effort. So it's a huge effort that would really make a big change within the county. It would help us divert waste and create jobs and ensure that we can even use biofuel coming from the anaerobic digesters. So it could create a green loop. So that's another one of the investments that we're trying to promote. And then we're also, as a county, within our facilities, transitioning to renewable energy and reducing energy overall. So we have a goal, which is reducing our energy consumption on a 3% year basis, which we've been doing since 2010. And as you can see here with a super simple graph, it's just like slowing down. But we're also investing in decarbonizing our facilities. And then decarbonizing sounds really like jargony. It's essentially reducing the use of gas. And so we're doing that. We're also expanding other sources of renewable energy, such as solar arrays. And we are continuing to follow our B3 building guidelines, which are essentially just promoting a lesser use of energy. And then for decreasing the heat island effect with a focus on areas of highest vulnerability, we are building a roadmap towards a 1 million tree, which is our really big goal. But we want to do it in an effective, meaningful way. It's not just, okay, let's just throw a billion trees somewhere. It really wouldn't reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Well, it would, but it wouldn't reduce the urban heat island effect. As you know, it's essentially focused on areas with lesser green areas. So urban core, a lot of pavement. It is usually where we have many families that are facing health issues. So the idea is not to simply throw trees anywhere, but to make sure that they are in areas that will support the better health of these communities. And that brings us back to the map that I showed you before, the climate vulnerability map. So we're working with cities. We will expand conservation easements. And in the meantime, we're also trying to create green jobs. Last year, we tackled a project with our corrections department, and it was many departments. It was resident real estate services, it was corrections, it was environment and energy within their forestry program, just a lot of coordination to create a program that we call the Green Pathways for youth that are in corrections, so that they could, instead of just spend time within corrections, go plant trees, learn a little bit of the trade of tree care, and then end up with a diploma. Initially, we worked with U of M. Now we're working with an institution that is called Tree Trust, but we're learning from that pilot. And this is one of the things that we want to do, restore not only spaces, but people's lives. And finally, I wanted to give you a summary of what things are looking like in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So we have 3 huge drivers. We have energy, vehicle travel, and then waste and wastewater. And we've been gathering data from 2010, which is our baseline to that 2050 net zero. And one of the key targets that we have by 2040 is to reach 45% reduction on greenhouse gas emissions. And I am really pleased to say that we are right now projecting a 41% reduction by then. And this is assuming business as usual. This is without the implementation of any climate action plan. So I think I'm really positive about us reaching a better future, but this will take a lot of effort. As you probably heard me say, we've been working with such and such department. We're doing the same with different agencies, with different groups of people, neighborhood, communities. So I would love to maybe, have a further conversation with all of you in the future too, to see how we can support each other, because this is an effort that will take many different agencies and all hands on deck. And going back to partnerships, so we've been trying to build this vision beyond Hennepin County. Obviously, climate change does not impact solely Hennepin County, so we have to make sure that we're coordinating across systems. And one of them is we've been supporting the Minnesota Climate Action Framework through the government's office. We have also been participants of the Minnesota Sustainable Transportation Advisory Council, the STAC. I'm sitting there. There's a subcommittee for VMT, again, jargon, vehicle miles travel, looking at reducing greenhouse gas emissions from transportation and ensuring that all this big funding that's coming from the federal level is done in an equitable way. And then we also have I really love this map because this one is showing you where we're working and who we're working with. So you have an overlay in red, the cities that we identified as climate vulnerable. And then in blue, you can see all of the partnerships that we currently have. We have 2 city cohorts, we're calling that for lack of a better name, 1 cohort for EV infrastructure deployment and 1 cohort for tree canopy expansion. And these are cities, many of them have climate action plans, some of them don't. Some have directors focused solely on sustainability, some of them don't. We don't care. We just want to make sure that everybody's connected and we can support each other. So that's what we have currently. And obviously there are missing pieces, but we'll get there. So this is our first year. And then we also try to integrate what we're doing with a global vision, because we're trying to bring really to earth the IPCC report and all of the recommendations that sometimes feel so up in the air with no concrete action. So we're working with IPCC. We've been working with U of M, trying to identify how do we take this sustainable development goals, again, into something concrete. Sometimes it feels like, right, at the UN and these really big spaces with really big people, really big talk and nothing concrete. So how do we break down, for example, resiliency factors that we can measure and trace? I think we have a really robust analysis of greenhouse gas emissions. We do. We have an inventory. One thing that I want to do in the next years is to create the same for resiliency. What is making the lives of people actually better? And we don't know that yet. We're just looking at gases. I feel like gases are not everything, right? We have to make sure that we're also tapping on the living conditions of our residents. And then we are developing a community engagement strategy. This year, we hired 2 community liaisons. We're trying to ramp up a new vision for community engagement that goes beyond, hey, here's a pen and a brief conversation, and that's it. But actually creating strong relationships, creating a feedback loop so that our communities have the ability to come and say, I've been doing this in my garden. How can I get more funding from the county? How can I bring this to other residents? And so we're building this resiliency from the ground up, and then leveraging our University of Minnesota partnership. So that's all I had for you today. And I'm here for any questions, comments. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Seriously, I know that we get to speak in many places, but I think this is one of the most meaningful places because I know all of you are sharing a similar mission, which is for the greater good of humanity. So really excited to hear from all of you, and thank you so much.
And we're going to use the mic so everybody can hear.
Good morning. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I'm very happy your office exists. And two questions. One is this church is solar. Our electric is solar through Cooperative Energy Futures, and we were able to purchase a share or contract with a share of a solar garden. Now that was allowed because we had the credit rating that worked. Of course, this doesn't work for less affluent communities. Is there some sort of way that the county can do the same in the lower income communities by somehow supporting that credit ability so that they can cover the 25-year life of these contracts? Because it's a great way to go. Out of pocket, it costs us essentially very little to do this, but you have to have the credit rating.
Yeah, me too.
Excuse me. With mic, use the mic, yeah.
I love the question. I think that's awesome. So one thing that I've seen too is that sometimes when we respond to this issue is within our facilities, and then we don't, go further and work with our communities. So that's something that we've been advocating for and trying to do. One way was with the cities themselves. But I think, and I'm really positive from all the influx that is coming, actually, there's the IRA, So we are looking at one specific fund that may be coming from the IRA, essentially to do that. And I'm really excited about it. It's similar to some other funds that are potentially will be looking at investing in tree canopy expansion and green jobs. There's one fund that I think it's called the Green Bank. Really exciting. So we're just waiting for further notification because right now it's just unclear what the eligibility will be. We know that the county can apply for that. It's just a matter of time, but that's a great question.
I loved your idea of creating a metric for resiliency and quality of life for residents so that we can kind of goal improvement on that. And it was just making me curious, what kind of systems could be in place to collect quality of life data in a safe and equitable way, especially because a lot of those communities that are most impacted may not feel comfortable offering a lot of that personal data, given how it's been used in the past.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So a couple of thoughts, like I think that sometimes we forget the correlation between climate and food security, for example. It's so intertwined, and yet I have had many questions from different people that are within the space. Like, what does that have to do with urban agriculture? It has everything to do with food security. That's one piece that I'm really interested in assessing, how much are people creating spaces where they can rely on, say, if the prices of food are increasing, which is happening right now. So that's one example. The second one could be, pollution and the correlation with health threats. So there are a couple of really cool metrics that are essentially, health determinants of, social determinants of health. So asthma cases, other, heart issue related cases that we have actually used. Please, maybe I'm just going to finish real quick. That we have used in the past, actually were included within the social vulnerability map that we shared. So I would probably look at those. And then maybe I really like your idea of working with community. I mean, one thing that I've noticed is maybe what we try to do, not only within the government, everywhere, is go into the community asking questions and leaving, instead of maybe co-creating metrics that would be more meaningful potentially. That's something that we were talking about with U of M, because then you could have, community-based organizations developing standardized metrics, and then they applying those surveys, if you will, within their communities and bringing that information up. So that's a conversation that we're having with U of M. That's something that they're excited to work with the current government through the climate action framework. Because that part is really missing. We're lacking on that. We're putting a lot of emphasis on emissions and mitigation, and that's okay. But I mean, change is happening right now, and we have to make sure that our communities are resilient. I'm sorry.
Lots of questions. I think Lizzie. Okay. Two questions. I live Lake and Hennepin, and I heard that they're going to redo the whole street from Lake and Hennepin all the way up to North Minneapolis and either make it bigger, littler. But one of the things they will be doing is possibly taking out the beautiful trees that are on those streets and replace them with little tiny ones because they're doing their redesign program. Is there any way that we could stop them from doing that?
That's
these gorgeous old trees that we have.
I don't know that. I'll be honest, but I think it might be difficult to stop. Those projects usually go through the capital improvement programs that are usually 5 couple decades programmed in the future. But this is what I'm understanding. If that's the Lake Street program, my thought, if I'm not correct, maybe I'm not, is that the investment there is to reduce the space of the road so that less people are driving around there, which is considered, they call it road diet, and that would potentially reduce emissions. Now, the issue is losing the trees, obviously. And that's, maybe there's potential for green areas within that investment. I'm not sure, but I know right now our transportation project delivery department is looking at creating complete streets. It's a series of measures again on how we're implementing green zones, how we're reducing space for less cars to be driven, more space for bike and ped. So I think that it is very unfortunate that these changes are happening, but I'm almost sure that there might be some help on reducing emissions on that.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
I could go back and get more information on that project.
Well, I won't go any further on that subject. But the second one is, there was a time, and I don't know if this still is done, when you have a restaurant, you'd put all your trash food and trash in a container and give it to the farmers for the pigs. Are they still doing that?
No, I don't think so. But I know that our environment and energy department is implementing a recyclable and organic waste program.
Okay.
And they're doing that with multifamily housing and I believe also with restaurants and with different,
Restaurants.
yeah,
Okay, because
companies.
I know they used to do it and then I thought they stopped and I wondered why. Okay, thank you.
Kind of follow up to that question in some ways. So one of our big problems, especially in this area, is a lack of tree canopy.
Mhm.
This particular place where the church is probably somewhere between 15 and 20% or less tree canopy. We know that 45% is what the scientists tell us we need for health in this region. Where I live, which is the Wedge, which is just neighboring, it's actually gotten as low as 8%. Because of the increase in development that has occurred, and we've taken out trees in the process. So I guess one of the, this is a more general question, not to you, but one question right now, developers are allowed to not have the green space that is required if they pay money that goes to the parks for new parks. But in a place like Minneapolis, we don't have a lot of space left for new parks. So that money is actually sitting in most neighborhoods accruing. In the Wedge neighborhood, it's over $1 million because there's no place for it to be spent. So that is a legislative thing that we kind of need to think about. Do we want to allow developers to get out of building in green by paying this fee that isn't going anywhere? And maybe it needs to be flipped and we need to actually pay them, subsidize housing trees on their property in order to keep things low enough that they can actually build things that people can afford. So that's kind of separate. But one of the things I'm really excited that you mentioned was the green bank. Mm-hmm. And if we're thinking big, one idea that I've had is a green core, which it already sounds like it's kind of starting with training incarcerated people to take care of trees. And so one thing that we could do is have a mat, because one of the problems when you put in new trees is that you lose half of them within 2 years. So because they need to be watered. And in a place like this, you know, in the boulevards, it's high renter areas and people don't feel empowered to go out and help water them and keep them alive. So we really need to, if we're going to really make an impact with the new trees, that we have to keep them alive. And maybe this is what this program is going to be training people to do. But if we do a green core, we could also have people, and this addresses how we approach community in ways that feel safe for them. But could we have a green core where we hire people from within the community, young people, retired people, who go in and talk to their neighbors about all of the different programs that exist, because right now it's almost choice overload. Yep. There are so many different programs that most people don't even know about, especially in places that are, working class, immigrant, have language barriers, all of these things. These are the people that could actually benefit the most from knowing about these programs because it would lower their bills. But there's high turnover. We have a hard time getting to them. So we could do a green core where we provide green jobs and actually go in and build relationships with people and help them get their LED free lights, help them winterize. There's free winterizing of windows, all of these things that already exist, right? So in some ways, do we need more new programs, or is it that we need people to know about the ones that exist? So anyway, that's just a kind of tossing out an idea if we're thinking big.
I love it. Yeah, let's connect. No, I think that's amazing. That's brilliant. And I think they would support each other because on one end, you have programs that would be, bringing people into a different pathway and then creating strengths and capacities for them to be able to live within the new means of these jobs. One thing that we were working with cities too is, as we're creating this sort of green pathway and this green workforce, if you will, we were offering, okay, because you have to take care of those trees, and like you said, in the first years of living, maybe we could have the cities pay for the maintenance, and then the green workforce just, works separately from the county. That's one thing. And then in addition to what you said of making sure that everybody knows of the different resources that are out there, I think that's really key. Our community liaisons are working on that, but I think if we could tap on Green Corps, that would be amazing. I agree. I mean, there's so many weatherization programs. A lot of the funding that's coming from the federal level too will be directly invested into residents. So we have to make sure that residents know that what's out there. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we're not pushing all of the decision making onto the residents when we don't create, the necessary structure for them to reside in. And one of the examples was, with implementation of complete streets, implementation of this type of policies that are reducing space for single vehicle occupancy, just driving around, maybe investing more in transit and making sure that we are, so car dependent, for example. So yeah, so many things that are happening. Really, really excited to connect.
My question is about, do you connect with other government entities like the Park Board and Minneapolis Park Board and so on? Because it looks like to me, in terms of the canopy issue, that we're going against each other, in that the canopy is really suffering, and it doesn't seem to be according, what your plan is and what you want to do, I think is really well thought of. The other thing is, again, with the Park Board, the water use that's going on. We've got the Mississippi at the lowest levels that we've had forever and ever. And I know we'd all like to ski, but maybe there's not enough water to do that.
Very true. Thank you so much for that question. So that's a huge item. We've been working with Three Rivers and other park boards to coordinate first. How do we make sure that we have enough seedlings, and how do we make sure that we have enough climate resilient trees? I know lately a lot of people have been talking about native plants, and that's really great. But now we're also looking at what are the plants that will actually, survive this new climate that we're seeing that is changing. The other part two, and both of you tapped on this, so I will not forget what you're mentioning. Land use, it's a huge barrier, and it's outside of the jurisdiction of Hennepin County. So that's why I brought out the partnerships piece. We need to coordinate with all of the cities. Cities have a saying on their land use. We don't. So it's a lot of influence without authority. The work that we do is making sure that we're creating the policy support, the vision, and even the tools for others to implement, and making sure that they have the willingness and the political intention to implement. It's a lot of work, but we're trying to do that. That's why we have this cohort of cities. And that's why we have that specific 1 million tree cohort with cities to make sure that we can tap on their land beyond we don't have enough land. There's no way. But at the same time, one thing that we were tracking, and this is the first time that I'm sharing this publicly, we have achieved as a county in the past 20 years, 250,000 trees have been planted. So that's a good start. Now we have to make sure that we can plant as a whole 100,000 trees per year to reach our 2030 goal. That's the key part. And the other part is too, conservation easements. We don't necessarily have to plant so many trees. We have to also take care of the current trees that we own, right? And so part of that is, for example, if there are issues with the emerald ash borer, making sure that we can take care of the current tree canopy that we have so that we don't lose them. And that's something that we're working closely with our park boards. But it's an ongoing effort, and we're going back to what you were saying. Maybe I'm going to go a little further. When you were mentioning, are you working with other counties and other entities? We are, and we're learning from their experiences. So Seattle, King County, they also did a 1 million tree goal. And they share with us how they achieve that, and they share the barriers, and they share the lessons. And the main lesson was we got a lot of, backlash because we put trees in areas without the heat canopy, the urban heat canopy. I'm sorry, the urban heat. Thank you so much. Yeah, and so the issue was that they did plant the 1 million trees, but it was not equitably. And so how do we do that? How do we not, go through the same issues that other counties have done? Another thing that they shared with us was make sure that you're taking care of the conservation easements, because at the end of the day, having a 30-year-old tree will reduce greenhouse gas emissions more than a new tree that could easily die in a couple of years. Going back to your point. So yes.
First, I'd like to just thank you for the work you're doing. This is remarkable and super encouraging. And then I have a question about energy use. And so decarbonization in terms of energy, I know there's a lot going on in terms of electricity with solar and wind and solar gardens. So I'm curious about the heating side of it and wondering what ideas you've got going there, and wondering if you've looked into this new thing called network geothermal, because that's equitable in the way that is used as well.
Thank you so much for that question. I think that's really key. So right now we're working on 2 RFPs. I believe one of them is to help us understand how do we decarbonize our energy center. And that is looking at geothermal as a source of energy. Same with our HCMCs, our Hennepin County Medical Center. So 2 big facilities that are actually one of the key ones that are producing a lot of emissions as we're tracking. And then that is within the county. Outside of it, in terms of our communities and residents, we're also looking at potentially piloting a program for heat pumps, for residents to adopt heat pumps. We're doing this with Edina, Bloomington, St. Louis Park, and another city that I'm forgetting. But these are small examples of work that we could do, to your point.
Okay, we have only 5 minutes left, but here's another question.
So the Hennepin County garbage burner, actually, I'm a big fan. Not everybody is, but I am. But I was always surprised when it was built that given the location it was built, that they didn't use this excess steam to run into a district heating system. Cogeneration is the most efficient thing you can do with heat. And instead they built a big steam disperser. Given its location, its proximity to downtown, any chance you're looking at piping that into the city and piping into the district heating system, which would be, once it's set up, would be a gold mine of very low cost of free energy.
I think that's a great point. And I know that our team within energy and environment that are overseeing the implementation of HERC are looking at different potential responses to how are we better, managing the HERC currently. One of the responses is actually the anaerobic digester. One of the issues that we saw was how do we better separate the current waste within HERC so that not everything is burned, especially the organics. So that's a great point that I would love to bring back to our environment and energy team.
Well, we're about to leave unless there's another burning question here. Oh, Kareem, there you go.
Please forgive me for jumping in on Deanna's topic. So as she said, I work with Deanna at Hennepin County government. HERC is always a sore point for us. The steam that's produced actually provides heat for about 6 downtown buildings and for Target Field. If you notice when you drive along in the winter, it's always looking like it's shoveled. That's actually heated. That's heat generated by the HERC. The issue with that facility is that this plan would render that facility irrelevant if it were adopted. Those partnerships that Deanna talked about with Minneapolis are they're critically important. If we can stop getting garbage generated And if we can get Minneapolis to recycle for multifamily and commercial, there'd be less trash produced, less need to burn it. Right now, it's the most efficient, effective thing. It's the least of the bad it's the least harmful of bad options. So it has a outsized reputation, and it's an unfair target. This plan demonstrates the county's commitment. Like, we all share the same goals. We just can't turn it off overnight because we have to put trash somewhere until we figure out what's the best, until the strategy is implemented and successful. So I just wanted to just kind of say that HERC isn't as nasty as everybody. It's not 100% bad thing.
Thank you, Kareem.
Okay, you're fine. So I guess we're about to close then. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
And a word about next week. Next week, we do this every Sunday. So next week, we have a forum on light pollution and what we can do about it, which does not mean everybody's sitting in the dark. Our speaker will be Todd Burlett. He's a delegate with the International Dark Sky Association, called IDA, the world's leading authority on light pollution since 1988. Todd Burlett is also president of Starry Skies North. That is the Minnesota and Mid-Continent chapter of the National IDA Dark Sky Association.